All right. Hi there. Today, I am going to teach you class number 2 of language and literacy development. And today's topic is the development of spoken language competence. The first two questions I want to ask you to get you to start thinking a little bit is, how did you learn language and how did you develop your literacy skills? So those are two very important questions to be thinking about. So did you learn language at home? Was it at school? What were the contexts that allowed you to learn language in general? And how did you learn literacy, the reading and the writing? Did your parents help you? Was it just your teacher? Was it a combination? Was it easy? An easy process? Was it difficult? Start thinking about that. And as educators, we're always kind of thinking about like, how's that process for our learners, right? The next question is, how does a dual language learner, what we call a DLL, learn two languages at a time? So we all serve students that come from different language backgrounds, right? Students that are learning two languages at the same time, they might be learning English at the same time that they are a Spanish speaker at home. That's their first language, or maybe they speak Russian or Arabic or other languages, right? At home. For example, I am a Portuguese speaker. I'm from Brazil, so I speak Portuguese as my first language. And then when I started learning English, I was learning two languages at the same time. It's fascinating. So think about your students. What are the languages that they're learning at the same time? And then I have this visual for you at the bottom. So what are those competencies that they have to learn to be able to be successful? You have to be listening and speaking and reading and writing. So I want you to be thinking about language as 4 distinct domains. So I want you to be thinking about language in terms of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In all those 4 domains, sometimes, or most of the time, they'll be developing at different rates at different times. So you are not going to have somebody learning a language, whatever language it might be just English, right? Or 2 languages or 3 languages. It might not be happening all at the same time, at the same rate. It might be happening, maybe I'm learning listening first and then I'm speaking, next. Maybe, I'm reading first and then I'm going to learn to write next. So you might learn a lot of, listening, and then speaking, you're not as proficient. So your proficiency levels will vary depending on, your the level of exposure, your own, abilities to learn, and all that. So there are many different factors that influence the way that we learn a language, and your social interactions with your peers, and your opportunities to learn. So we're going to talk about that probably next class as well, and dig in a little more about dual language and like how do you actually learn a second language acquisition. We can bring that topic back. But today we're going to focus on spoken language. So we're going to be talking more about the speaking domain right here. So I have this visual for you. So I would say that input would be more of a receptive kind of modality for language, would be the listening and the reading. And then output would be more of a productive modality of language, would be speaking and writing, right? We call reading and writing, we call that literacy. And then the listening and speaking, we call it oracy. Those are 2 names that we will be using. So literacy is reading and writing, oracy, listening and speaking. All right, you can write that down. That might be a good little, definition. Maybe oracy is listening and speaking. Literacy is reading and writing. It's something for you to remember. All right. Okay, so when you look at this image, I'm thinking about how important oral language is, how important speaking is. So if you look at this graph, I have oral language at the bottom of everything. So when a student starts, for example, kindergarten, right? I'm saying kindergarten because, oh, it's the beginning of elementary school. The student has gone through probably preschool and toddler age, you know, schooling. Hopefully there was some sort of, you know, schooling at that point and all that. The student's gonna come to school with a lot of oral language, hopefully from, you know, home, from another school environment. That's all you're gonna be building on. So oral language is everything. If we remove this pillar from this scale, what happens? All falls apart. There's no reading and writing without oral language. So I just want you to have this visual for a second. We need to build students' oral language really well so that they can be successful in all the other components of language, okay? All right, so I want us to be thinking about some of the things that this book is going to be talking about during this quarter, okay? So some of the things that we're going to be studying is brain, language, and literacy. Today's topic is number 2, the development of spoken language competence. And then 3 will be the development of reading and writing. The next topic will be individual and group differences in language and literacy. And then number 5, instructional techniques and programs. So we're gonna be talking about more of a strategy kind of approach. If you have a backpack of strategies, let's make your backpack a little bit heavy, right? Have all those strategies for you to put in your backpack and take with you to the classroom. And you can share your strategies with, you know, your teacher friends and your, you know, maybe your director at your center or your principal. It's really nice to learn new things. So today we're going to watch a very cool read aloud. I want you to be looking at the way that the teacher is interacting with the students. So she's gonna read a book, and what is she gonna do with that story? How is she gonna interact with the students is what I want you to be thinking about and observing. All right, so I'm gonna read what it says over here on our screen. It says, reading text aloud provides a way to help all students access the material and develops their skill as active listeners. So you're developing their oral language, right? Their spoken language through listening, right? Listening to proficient readers provides a model for fluent reading and can help students, especially English language learners, recognize how to pronounce unfamiliar words. So let's watch this video together and then see what happens, okay?
Good morning, readers. It's so nice to see you today. I have a book that I'm so excited to share with you. Remind ourselves what we do when we agree with something that someone in this class says. Can you show me how you agree? Great. When you show someone that you agree with what they say and you do it in a way that's respectful and not interrupting, you're really taking care of your friends, right? By showing that you're listening and that we care what other people say and think. We've been thinking hard about the characters in our books. We've been trying to really get to know them by thinking about what they do and how they feel. Today, we're going to meet a new character in a book. You ready to meet our new character? Yes. So the book is called Bernice Gets Carried Away. And I chose this book because I thought you would really like it. The illustrations are really beautiful. And it has a really good character in here. So we're going to have a lot to talk about. The book is called Bernice Gets Carried Away, and it's written by Hannah E. Harrison. And it's about this cat, and her name is Bernice. And you can see that she's really what? Oh, yeah, she's grumpy. I can tell because her hands are like this and her face is all scrunched up. She's in a bad mood. Can you show me what you look like when you're in a bad mood? Oh, yeah. Oh, look at those grumpy faces. Before we get to reading, I'm going to teach you a new word. A word that we can use when we're in a bad mood. The word is brooding. What's the word? Brooding. Yeah. And brooding means when you have unhappy thoughts. Okay, so the word is brooding. And I'm going to put it up here.
It is a cloud.
It's a cloud, right. The cloud is brooding. And I'm going to actually show you that in our book. So here's Bernice. And she is brooding. She's in a bad mood. And if you look in the corner, I'm wondering if my friends in the back can see that.
The cloud.
Yeah, what's the cloud doing?
Brooding.
Yeah, the cloud
Just like
is
the picture.
brooding. I'm thinking about Bernice here, and I can tell she's in a bad mood, but it looks like she's where?
At a party.
At a party, right? So I'm wondering why she is unhappy at a birthday party. I'm also thinking about what I know about books. And I can see that in the beginning of the book, Bernice is in a bad mood. She's brooding. But how do you think she's going to feel by the end of the book?
Happy. Happy.
I hear a lot of people saying happy. Can you tell me why you think? Yeah, why do you think she might be happy at the end?
Because something good happened to her.
You think that something good is going to happen?
Something that she's gonna make friends at the party. Then make friends at the party.
I can see that other people have their hands up. If you agreed with something that your friend said, you can. I can tell that you know a lot about how books will go. We know that characters often change in a story. And today, we're going to be reading to see how and why Bernice changes. So when the characters change, they often learn something. And it helps us figure out what lesson the author is trying to teach us. All right, so as I read today, pay close attention to Bernice and how she changes in the book. It was a horrible, dreary day, and it suited Bernice's mood just fine. Everyone else had gotten a frosting rose on their piece of cake, but not Bernice. All she'd gotten was a plain white square from the middle. Everyone else had gotten ice-cold strawberry melon sodas, but not Bernice. All that was left for her was prune grapefruit, and it was warm. And of course, one of the big kids had gone and smashed the piñata to smithereens before Bernice had even taken a swing. Everyone else had gotten yummy candy and prizes, but not Bernice. She'd found one lousy gumdrop that someone had stepped on. Yes, Bernice was in a bad mood. All right, friends. I'm going to stop there and think for a minute. So we're talking about how characters can change. We know a little bit about how Bernice was at first, right? I can see her hands are like this. She looks angry. And you know what? The author tells us exactly what she's feeling. The author says Bernice was in a bad mood. So I'm going to add that to our anchor chart. I'm going to add bad mood. Another word you might use to describe how Bernice is feeling. You can whisper it in your hand. Whisper it in your hand. So when she saw that they were about to hand out the balloons, she didn't take any chances. Mine, she said, and grabbed the whole bunch. I want to think about, what did Bernice do there? And what does it tell us about Bernice that we might add to our chart? I want you to think in your head, what did Bernice do? And what does that tell us about Bernice? And I'd like you to turn to your turn and talk partner and share what you thought.
I think she's gonna take the whole balloons and fly it up the sky. And I think she is gonna be selfish. And the last one thing, I think she gonna too much gonna give her some.
I think that's interesting, that word selfish that you said. Can you lock that in your brain for me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I heard a lot of conversations. I heard a lot of people talking about what Bernice did and what that tells us about Bernice. So raise your hand if you have something to share that you thought or your turn and talk partner thought. My friend in the back?
I said she was gonna take the whole room and be selfish to your other out.
Take all the balloons and feel selfish. Give me show me if you agreed with our friend in the back.
What's that? You should tell her our names. I think she got the balloon because she didn't get nothing that she wanted.
She didn't get anything that she wanted, and so she was feeling like maybe she deserved these balloons. Yeah, that was okay. So let's write down some of those ideas before we find out what happens. So at first, she was in a bad mood. She didn't get what she wanted. Is that what you're saying? That she didn't get what she wanted? And she was selfish. So let's see what happens. But it was one balloon too many, and up, up, and away floated Bernice.
She wanted to do that.
She floated up past a surly gray squirrel. I like that word surly. It's another word that kind of means brooding. He's kind of mean and angry. He's surly. Do you see how surly he is?
Yes. Surly.
Alongside a very blue bluebird.
Oh, it's going to be cloud.
And to the bottom of a brooding black cloud where she got stuck. Bernice guessed she wasn't the only one having a bad day. Did you guys hear our word?
Yes.
Our word brooding. You can see the cloud. It's brooding. She peered down past her paws at the big world below and noticed how little everything looked. Suddenly, her problems seemed pretty small. Bernice glanced up at her enormous bunch of balloons and felt pretty small herself. You know, I'm looking at this picture of Bernice. Can my friends see? Her ears are down and her face looks a little wet. Sad, yeah. She doesn't look angry and brooding anymore, does she? She looks sad. And I'm wondering if something's going to change. You think she might get happy? And I'm wondering if she's feeling a little sorry that she took the balloons. Oh, you think that she might be feeling a lot sorry? So what do you think she might do?
I think she might make a sad face to show that she's sorry that the cloud will bring her down.
You think she's going to make a sad face and the cloud might help her come down? And how do you think her friends will feel?
Happy.
You think that she might come down and share the balloons with her friends?
So the cloud blew her away.
So she gave the cloud a balloon to remind him of sunnier days. He got fluffy and stopped weeping rain. She gave the bluebird a balloon to brighten her empty nest. The bird burst into beautiful song. What about this one? She gave the squirrel a balloon to soften him up. He hugged it and smiled and chattered as Bernice gracefully floated back to the ground. And one of our friends up front said that when we were on the last page said, what about the squirrel? And I thought, wow, you really know how books work, right? You really remembered who she had passed.
I said that she was going to share the book with her friends.
Yeah.
She is.
You think she is?
The party who she was. But no, she gonna give it to him.
And then everyone else began sharing too.
I knew it.
Yes, it was a sparkly, sunshiny day. And it suited Bernice's mood just fine. Give me a thumbs up close to your heart if you enjoyed this story about Bernice and how she got carried away. Okay. So we saw that Bernice changed in the story, right? You could almost say that she learned something and grew a little bit. She grew from brooding to what? How would we describe happy?
Excited. Excited.
By the end, she was happy. So she wasn't in a bad mood anymore. She was happy.
Excited.
And instead of selfish, what did she do?
Sharefish. She
shared, right? I like that word, sharefish. I might have to add that into my words that I use. So she was happy and she shared. All right, friends, let's think about what Bernice learned in this book. I want you to think in your head, how did Bernice grow and change, and what did she learn? I'd like you to turn and talk to your turn and talk partners about something that Bernice learned, how she changed. Can you tell me about how Bernice changed?
She just said give everybody a balloon or just anything, and she felt happy to get that from the ground.
She was happy to get
Everybody else said to get because they got a balloon.
She was happy at the end. She was happy to get on the ground. And what else might have made her happy? That she shared with everyone. She was happy that she was on the ground and happy when she shared. All right. I heard so many good discussions about how Bernice changed and why and what she learned. Can you raise your hand if you can tell me something that you were thinking or something that your turn and talk partner was thinking and share with us? She's kind of like she got a little power of three lesson, right? She learned how to take care of others by sharing. You can, if you agree with your friends, you can show us agree. So let's write some of these ideas here on the why. So at first she was in a bad mood, she didn't get what she wanted, and she was selfish. She took all those balloons. But at the end, she was happy and she shared. And so what did she learn? She learned to share to make others happy. And that helped Bernice also, right? It made her happy too. Thank you for sharing this book with me. It was really interesting to hear all your thoughtful conversations about it. We learned that characters are always learning and changing and growing, just like we are. And when we pay close attention to the characters in the beginning of the book and by the end, often we learn a lesson and we get to what the big idea in the story is. So thank you so much for being such good listeners.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to close this. All right. Perfect. I am going to come back to our PowerPoint. Yes. So as you watch this read aloud, there were so many things that you could be thinking about. And of course, with the younger students, you can do this in many different ways and different days. You can break that into different times, right? Because kids sometimes can't sit down for that long. You can see that the students were trained to be sitting, you know, for a long time and do that kind of activity. So they did really well. She worked with the vocabulary words. She worked with the comprehension. She engaged students in conversation. They were listening and they were actively participating. So that was a very intentional read aloud activity. All right. So I want you to keep thinking about this, all the strategies that she used throughout her read aloud. and we're gonna circle back to that later on, all right? Okay, so today's topic, we're going to talk about spoken language competencies and the development of phonological skills, as well as utilizing interactive read aloud to support oral language development. All right, so, and let's see, and those were our topics that we're covering this quarter. Now, think about, on the right side right here, you have forms of language. We're going to be talking about language in a sense that we're going to talk about semantics, right? Semantics means meaning. We're going to talk about phonology. Phonology is studies sounds. And then we're going to talk about grammar. We're going to talk about the forms of language, the way that we put words together to form, you know, sentences that have meaning, right? Now we're going to talk about spoken language competencies in a sense that students develop language abilities, their conversational skills. So I'm looking at this middle area right here of my page. So why do we communicate, right? Because we have the desire to talk, to communicate with others, to, you know, show respect for others, and to show that we want to get along, to show reciprocity, and also to show that we can take turns. So we go back and forth. So conversation is always like one person talking to another. So it's like back and forth, right? And it's like showing that we can, we're not only thinking about ourselves, like lack of egocentrism means like you're not just like, oh, it's all about me. No, it's about the two that are talking. So the conversational skills will be developing those abilities, right? Those skills, the desire to communicate and all those abilities that I just went through. And ways that we do that. So we want to inform, we want to, those are our goals, right? We want to inform, we want to persuade others to do things we want. So we use language for those reasons. Like a child might want a toy, they might want food, they might want something, and they will communicate with you to get or achieve their goal, right? Or a command, they need, you know, to get to something, and they want something done. And so those are some of those goals that the spoken language is fulfilling. So those are some of the things to be thinking about, why we use spoken language and why it's important to develop. Ooh. All right. Our next one is, why should teachers care about whether children acquire spoken language competence? So children who enter school with high levels of phonological, semantic, and grammatical knowledge learn to read better than children with low levels of these forms of knowledge. So it helps them with their ability to learn, right here, this first box, right? The second thing is a child's ability to form positive relationships in school and adapt to the demands of the classroom. Socially skilled children do better in school and engage more readily in school tasks than socially rejected children. So that's another fact. And then 3, spoken language will help them comprehend text better, right? They comprehend narrative or expository texts because that require a level of understanding that is a lot higher than, you know, than other types of text, right? Because they will have to understand irony, sarcasm, humor, metaphors, false statement, figurative language, and all those things. So comprehension of text is huge. So developing the competence of spoken language is huge, right? So we're gonna help our students develop their spoken language. Ooh, let me see, our next slide. Changes of spoken language competence over time. So I'm gonna talk about component 1. So component 1 is phonological, semantic, and grammatical knowledge. That's the first one, right? So children incrementally add and refine their phonological and grammatical knowledge between birth and the age of 5 or 6. And then their vocabulary, or the semantic part, like the meaning, they increase after age 5, right? And their vocabulary and all that after the age 5. They increase that part a lot more after they're 5. They are able to recognize and produce sound patterns of their native language, and they add appropriate ending to words. And this first component, they arrange words in proper grammatical order. It's just beautiful. This is the first component of spoken language, right? The component 2 is when kids start to develop their conversational skills. So they know that first part, the phonological, semantic, grammatical knowledge, the basic blocks of spoken language. Then they start conversational skills. So young children can initiate and sustain conversations at that point. They sometimes, they need supportive adults to learn that skill, of course, so they can choose appropriate partners to have the conversation, and they will learn by example, right? So knowing when to interrupt somebody, when not to interrupt somebody, those are huge things to teach children. And you know that if you have kids, you know that they sometimes interrupt you when they're not supposed to. So those things they have to learn. So those are conversational skills. Component 3, communicative goals. So children express themselves through gestures, actions, and a variety of pragmatic, which means context, behaviors, right? So they express their intentions with words and all that, like questions, with emotions through imperative sentences and all that. By the age 7, so that's component 4, comprehension and use of communicative devices. That's when they get more advanced. By the age 7, they understand and direct requests and use polite structures to accomplish their goals like adults. Irony and sarcasm can be used, as well as humor, and that's really huge for them, right? Now, my next slide is what can promote the language competence of spoken language for kids. So for the first stage, I have here, children need to have multiple opportunities to speak and be spoken to, so they can start that foundational knowledge of the phonology. In order for there to be growth in their phonological, semantic, and grammatical knowledge. Now, the second stage is children need opportunities to engage in conversations with patient and supportive adults and other children to slowly internalize the features of coherent and considerate conversations. For the third competence, it is children need certain kind of scaffolding and responsivity from adults to recognize that other people have minds similar to their own, or sometimes different, right? This insight gives them a sense of how to say things or do things in order to have the effect on others like they want, right? So how to affect people's minds and their behavior. So they learn to not manipulate, but yeah, that might be the right word. How to get them to do what they need. So they're learning to have that effect on people. That's the goal of communication, how to persuade them, how to get them to do what they need them to do. And then component 4 is when they become more advanced, right? So how to promote that is so increased memory capacity to consider multiple aspects of a situation, help children to be able to coordinate several communicative goals at once. Children become more able to understand intentionally false statements like humor, sarcasm, and white lies. So as they learn to multitask and they become more advanced learners, their brain is so much more advanced, they will be able to communicate and have different things going on at the same time. So think about multiple ways that you can have a rich environment for them to communicate. All right, the next part is, and that's the million-dollar question that I have for you. How can educators help learners develop spoken or oral language? Think about that for a second. How can educators help learners develop spoken or oral language? That's a really good question, right? That's why we're here. So to answer that question, I'm gonna go through a little bit of the basics here. What is a phoneme? First thing is, phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a word that makes a difference in its pronunciation. So the little sounds, right? As well as its meaning. For example, the S in the word soar distinguishes it from the word roar, right? That one little letter has its sound, right? The S instead of for roar, and that makes all the difference. So that's a phoneme. That right there is the phoneme. This is an example of phonemes for you, a phonemes chart. Now, the development of phonological skills for you. So on the left side, you have the receptive phonological skills is the ability to recognize typical sound pattern, okay? So levels of recognition abilities for students. So the phoneme, you're gonna teach them the sounds, individual sounds, the syllable, when you put sounds together, right? And then the word, and then the prosody would be the patterns of rhythm. So when everything kind of rhymes and have sounds, right, together. Those are receptive phonological skills that kids need to recognize. Those are abilities that they need to develop. Now, productive, they need to be able to produce phonemes accurately. So they need to learn how to make those sounds. Combine phonemes into higher units, meaning make those syllables and then make words and make sense of what they mean, right? And create multi-word expressions. That's huge. Now here I have an example of developmental sequence of phonological skills. So here I have age 5, some of the things you can do. Recognizing rhyme, for example, clapping, counting syllables by clapping. An example would be which two rhyme, bat, bug, or hat. So as soon as you say bat and hat, right? So the word dog has one syllable and turtle has 2. So you would teach them those things. So I'm gonna leave this here for you to take a look at this. I would probably pause the video right now, take a look at this. And so it breaks it down by age. So age 5, 5.5, 6, all the way to 9. So go ahead and pause. And check it out, okay? It's very interesting to see how this comes together. Those are some of those phonological skills and how, in which order they come in. And that's a good way to go about it. You can try those strategies in this order, and as they learn, you go to the next one and the next one and the next one. That's a good progression. All right, so what's the importance of children's acquisition of phonological processing competence in the classroom? So it's important because they have to have the ability to analyze sounds in spoken language, right? They have to have the ability to map sounds in words onto graphemes. They have to be able to write. So they have to know the sounds and how those sounds are related to letters and how those letters become words that they actually write, right? Those letters become words. And so spoken language becomes written language. So you got to be thinking about that. So speaking becomes writing. And so it's a huge, huge leap. You have to be really thinking about how you're going to take the students to that portion of language, right? And form stored representations on the sound patterns in words. Now the progression for those receptive skills I have at birth. So at birth, babies recognize prosodic, or meaning sound, features of their native languages. Then by 4 months, they discriminate, they know the difference between consonant and vowel sounds. By 8 months, they know subtle differences, the contrast. They know the syllables and hear individual words and passages. By 12 months, they use phonetic and phonotactic, which means the combination of syllables, and syllable stress patterns to analyze utterance, which are like chunks, into individual words. And then between 1 to 7 years, they have the ability to recognize progressively smaller portions of words. So it's very detailed how the brain works and how one can learn a language. It's very complex and it's beautiful, right? Now, productive skills, by 7 months, babies start babbling and pronouncing certain vowels. Then by 12 months, they know to use 11 consonants and 3 vowel sounds. By the age 3, they know the correct pronunciation of vowels and consonants. And by age 7, blends and combinations. So it's much more advanced of those productive skills. And then I have the developmental milestones here for you. So you can look at this. So 3 months, cooing and gurgling. 6 months, babbling. 12 months, first words. 18 months, those 5 to 40 words. 2 years, 150 to 300 words. And 2 to 3 word sentences. By 3 years, they know 900 to 1,000 words, ask short questions, and then about 4 years, they know 2,000 words and 5 or more word sentences. And then when they are about 5 years, they identify letters and create longer sentences. It's fascinating how babies develop language. Now, we know that students might have difficulties learning, right? So there are some deficits, reading deficits related to phonological processing. So what could that be? So the receptive phonological skills could be the inability to access and manipulate segmented phonological representation of words, how to actually know those sounds and how to represent them. And the second bullet over there says underdeveloped phonological representations. 3, reading disabilities. Or 4, language learning impaired, what we call LLI. And on the other side, we have productive phonological skills. It could be articulation disorders, semantic syntactic deficits, so the meaning and the way that you put the sentences together, or the words, the pieces together, and then verbal working memory. All right. Now let's talk about more strategies, all right? So we're going to look at this interactive read aloud to support the development of oral language. So reading aloud to children is a critical component of supporting their oral language development. When teachers regularly engage children in interactive read alouds, including holding conversations before and after reading the book, children have opportunities to practice their oral language skills. All right, so let's watch this one. All right. Okay.
For today's informational text read aloud, I'm going to read a book called Is It Hot or Is It Cold? And I've picked 3 vocabulary words to teach the kids today during this read aloud. And those are thermometer, liquid, and tube. And you just saw me glance at the back of the book. That's because I've prepped.
So I've put the 3 words that I'm planning to teach on the back of the book where only I can see them, and also some notes, some teaching notes for myself, and also the child-friendly definitions for each word. That way I'm not trying to explain it to the kids on the spot. I already have a plan for what I'm going to say to them to help them understand these words during the text. The other thing about teaching vocabulary to young children, like kindergartners, and children in general, is we want to give them a lot of opportunities to interact with the words. Because these kids are super little, I've got a few things to show them to help with the words. So these are some different types of tubes I'm going to use when I talk about the word tube. I've got some thermometers I'm going to use when I talk about the word thermometer. And they're going to be able to see that the liquid in the thermometer goes up and down, because liquid is another word that I am teaching today. Okay, so today I have a book to read to you. It's called, Is It Hot or Cold? And the first thing I was going to tell you is that on each page, what I'm going to do is I will fan the book. You don't have to tell me I can't see, because I'll make sure that you have a chance to see. That sound okay? Okay. Okay. So this book is called, Is It Hot or Cold? Well, we'll see. We're going to talk about that. We can use a thermometer to find out how hot or cold it is outside. Can you guys say thermometer? Thermometer. So a thermometer is a tool to measure how hot or cold something is. And this picture right here is a thermometer. Great, good job. So it says some kinds of thermometers have a glass tube with liquid inside. I'm just about to tell you that. So liquid is something that flows like water. And this liquid right here is what color? Red. It's a red liquid. And listen to this. And it's in a tube. A tube is a pipe. And it's kind of empty inside, okay? And the liquid, the red liquid, can move up and down inside that thermometer, okay? I'm going to tell you some more about that. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more so you can see. Yes?
Does it change colors?
It doesn't change color, but it does go up and down to tell us how hot or cold it is outside. So some kinds of thermometers have a glass tube, remember that's the pipe, with liquid inside. So that's that red stuff that can flow and go up and down. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what it does. When the air around the tube gets warmer, the liquid moves up inside the tube. So that's this picture right here. And when the air around the tube gets colder, the liquid moves down inside the tube. Yes?
What are those things in the bag of it?
Well, those things are in the back of it are my special feature notes. So I remember what I want to tell you. That's a good question. So look here, this is super cold. It's snowy, and the liquid has gone down in the tube in the thermometer. And over here, it's super hot, so the liquid went high. You got it. It does kind of look like Texas, doesn't it? Okay, so there are numbers. Check this part out. There are numbers on the thermometer that show how hot or cold it is outside. So now I'm going to show you some different places that are hot or cold and how the thermometer looks. 1 second. Some places get cold in the winter, and someone said that's really cold because there's snow, right? And when the number on the thermometer is 20, which is down low, people have to wear warm clothes. So the liquid in the tube, is it down low or up high? You can all tell me. Down low because it's so cold. Okay. When it gets high, it's hot. Someone saw this picture and said they think it's hot, but let me read to you. Some places get warm in the spring. That means not too hot, right? Just a little bit hot. When the number on the thermometer is 70, some people might plant flowers in their garden because it's springtime and it's a little bit warm. So here, the liquid in the tube inside the thermometer is around 70, and that means warm. Not too hot, way up here, not too cold, way down there. Some places get hot in the summer. When the number on the thermometer is 90, some people go swimming. That's right. Let me see. Let's ask this person over here. Go ahead.
It's a race.
It's a race. So let me ask you, my friend, is the liquid in the thermometer way up high here and kind of down low here? So this one is way hotter. That's right. It's almost all the way up to 100, so it's super hot. Okay, wait, I've got a new one to show you now. Some places get cool in the fall, so not super cold, just a little cool. When the number on the thermometer is 50, sort of right in the middle, some people may rake leaves. Right? That's a cool. You did, you rake leaves. Sometimes we rake leaves in the spring and the fall. And this last page says, what is the number on your thermometer today? And this is a different kind of thermometer that doesn't have liquid, and this one has liquid. And I thought, since it asked us that question, what is the number on your thermometer today? I want to show you what I did. I looked on the weather forecast, and I said, what is the weather going to be like right here today? And I'll show you. Okay, hang on one second. I'll show you. So here I'm showing you that the liquid, I colored it in, it's not real liquid, but in a real thermometer it would be liquid. The liquid in the tube on the thermometer is right about 70. It's not super hot up high here, and it's not super low. So who wants to raise their hand and tell me what they think that's telling us about how hot or cold it will be today? How about you in the striped shirt?
Hot.
You think it's hot, super hot, or just kind of hot, or cold? Hot? Just hot. What do you think? Warm, because if it was super hot, where would it be?
All the way up.
Up high, the liquid would be super high in the tube. Okay, so I'm gonna show you something else. Can you guys tell, well, let me show you this. Tell me what shape this is. I just sort of told you the word. Why don't you tell me? Tube, can you all say tube? Tube, and who can raise their hand and tell me where this tube comes from? My friend back there. Okay, you with the purple shirt. Where does this come from now? A paper towel holder, right? So paper towels wrap around this tube, and I have another kind of tube here, and this tube is used for liquid. This is a really cool tube. Who wants to tell me what this kind of tube is? Ooh. Okay, what is it? A straw. This is a really silly straw. It's a silly tube. And you can suck liquid up, right, in the straw. So these are two kinds of tubes. So can you all tell me together what shape these are? Tube, you got it. Okay. And so I have something else to talk to you about, because we said liquid, right? And we said liquid is stuff that flows like water. And maybe you guys can tell me some other liquids that you might drink at lunch. What do you think? What's a liquid that you drink maybe at lunch? Go ahead. Milk. Anyone else have another liquid they drink? It's kind of sweet, and sometimes grown-ups don't drink that liquid too much. What do you think? Chocolate milk. That's delicious. What's another kind of liquid?
Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid is another kind of liquid, right? So can you all say liquid? Liquid, and liquid flows, right? And liquid can flow in a tube and a thermometer. And I have one last thing I want to show you. Do you remember what this tool is called? Thermometer. Can you all say it together? Excellent. So now I'm going to ask you something, okay? Can you show me with your hands, take one hand, and you can put it up high if you think that this thermometer shows the liquid is up high and very hot. And you can put your hand down low if you think this thermometer shows that it's cold and the liquid in the tube is down low. So where would your hand go in this one? It's 90, it's up at 90. I see hands are going really up high because it's hot, right? The liquid is up high in that tube, it is hot. Let me show you another one. Show me where your hands will go. I'm not gonna give clues this time. Oh, I saw those hands go down low. Your hands went down because the liquid in the tube is down low. It is cold. Okay, well, that's what I brought with me today. So thank you very much for listening to me read.
All right. This was an excellent video of another read aloud.
For today's.
All right, let me close that. and go back to our PowerPoint. Let's see. Yes, perfect. So be thinking about the read aloud strategies. How can you be doing that in your classroom, okay, to develop oral language, spoken language with your students? Okay, and then a few more things I want to bring up about this topic. So developing oral language can be very simple. And I have examples of, actually, this is my daughter, Julia. She's 4 years old. And I was able to record some videos with her because I wanted to talk about some simple ways that you can work with kids and just kind of bring that oral language to life. So obviously she doesn't know how to read yet. So she is going to learn to read in the next year or two. But this is part of learning to read. So I'm developing her oral language so she can learn to read and write, right? So I'm developing her oracy so she can develop her literacy. So I have 3 different videos right here for you. The first one is using props and puppets. That's the first strategy. Second one is building speaking through listening. And the third one is retelling with confidence. So I'm gonna show you the first one, all right? So the first one is using props and puppets. Ready? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so get the wolf. Okay, so what happened? So the wolf was like going around town, and then what happened?
And then the crocodile saved everyone from the bad wolf, and he said, "I want to kill you."
So the wolf came to town, and he was like, knock, knock, knock.
I got you in jail.
And he's like, little pig, let me in. And then what he say?
No.
Not for the hair on my chinny chin chin. And then I'll huff,
And
I'll
I
puff, and then I'll blow your house down. And then he did. So what he do? And then the house went down. And then what happened? The pig running. He started running to his little brother's house. Help! Help! Help!
There's 2 more things.
Ready? Go ahead.
Look.
All right, so this video is just for you to see that you can use props, puppets, anything you have around to illustrate a story. And orally, you're going to be telling a story that comes from a book, or maybe not. Maybe you're coming up with a story and then you're going to illustrate that story. So visually, it becomes very exciting, right? So I'm hoping that she can visualize it, that she can use oral language, you know, to retell that story sometime. All right. So the second one is building speaking through listening. So the book she has right now in her hands has a listening, a little button that talks. So it's going to be telling the story to her. A lot of times we have listening centers in our classrooms. You can play the CD, you can listen to the story, or it can be the teacher telling the story as well. So it's kind of cool to see how this works.
Yeah.
Yes.
Smell some breeze.
She wanders on. What's in this cottage? 3 full bowls of creamy porridge. She tries each bowl. Too hot, too cold. Oh, 3's for me, she says, quite bold. She tries 3 chairs. Too hard, too soft. She likes the 3rd, but then falls off. Upstairs, 3 beds all in a line. Too hard, too soft. The 3rd's just my porridge? It's all gone. And who's been sitting in my chair? Mine's broken now, cries baby bear. Look, someone's sleeping in my bed. Wakey, wakey, sleepyhead. Goldilocks cooks and cleans and beds. She puts things right, and now they're friends.
Okay, and so this one is an example of listening to build speaking. Now you can see that I have the props for her to retell the story later on right there, right by her. So that's my idea, is that she's gonna then later retell the story, use those elements right by her to reenact the whole story that she just read. Okay, and then the last one is retelling with confidence. So this is another book that she's reading, and so that's her retelling the story. Okay, she is gonna be telling me the story without any props. She has the book in her hands, and that's what she was able to do. Let's see what she did.
She climbed back to the room. What? And then she opened the door. She saw everything dirty and nasty. She saw that. And she, everyone is sad. And then a prince came. And I said, "Sleeping Beauty." And then the godmothers inside the castle all the way through. So they saw a princess downstairs. And then when the man saw, he said, and then her mom and dad and the fairies came. And I said, "Welcome." Yeah.
Yeah.
So she had me and her dad as her audience. So that made it very special because she wanted to, tell us what she remembered. It was kind of a special moment. So when kids find that they have a reason to read, a purpose to read, then it becomes a special moment for the literacy, right? So it's really cool because she's reading the pictures and she's telling the story. Now, it was interesting to see that she had words like, "Oh, it was nasty," and those words are not in the book, but she used other words to describe that. And I noticed that she was using words like in the past. She came, she was using verbs in the past to retell the story. So that was kind of interesting too. So start noticing verb tenses when students are retelling stories, characters, if they remember everything. Now, using some of those read aloud strategies that you watched in the 2 videos that I played during this class today, think about some of those strategies. How can you bring word cards and characters and all that? How can you do that? How can you bring that to life, during your lesson, so it becomes something that the students can use um, to build upon. All right. Okay, so let's go to, let me go to the last part. All right, so the last part is supporting oral language development in a language-rich environment. So reading aloud to children is a critical component supporting their oral language development. As you know, we talked about that several times. When teachers regularly engage children in interactive read alouds, including holding conversations before and after book reading, children have opportunities to practice their oral language skills. So I think there's a theme here, right? So before reading, during reading, after reading, over and over again, we're talking about the same skills. So that's something for you to be thinking about. So let's watch this quick video and let me do that. And this is our last one for today. Okay. All right, let me share the right screen and enjoy. And those students they're little, they're just small kids. So I want you to be thinking about how they interact with the teachers.
What do you know about how children's oral language skills develop? What are some of the things you do to encourage children to use their language skills? And how do you set up your classroom to ensure that children engage in rich language every day?
Oral language is the foundation for learning to read and write, and is critical for supporting the development of children's early literacy skills. Oral language is important for literacy development because if children can develop the skills and the knowledge now, when they begin to read, they'll be able to use that information. In a language-rich environment, children ages 3 and older should be building a vocabulary of at least 2,500 new words each year. As their vocabulary pool develops, children need to know how to use these new words. To do this, they need to learn 3 rule systems of language: semantics, syntax, and phonology. Semantics relates to word meanings. When we present young children with words that are disconnected from experiences, the words have no meaning for them. But if adults can supply words that are relevant to the child's experience while the child is experiencing something, the word takes on an instant meaning.
I have two things on him.
Those are udders. That's where the milk comes from.
There's a lot of research that shows that if children have good vocabulary, they'll recognize those words when they see them and they'll have an easier time reading them. As children learn new words, they need to know how to use them in a way that makes sense. If you introduce a new word within a context, children are more likely to understand its meaning and use it correctly themselves.
Oh, is he giving you a vaccine? This is a vaccine for her?
As children add new words to their vocabulary pool, they need to know how to put them together. This is called syntax. Syntax refers to grammar and the order of words in sentences. It's common for children to make syntactical approximations.
There's a big difference between the way a 3-year-old talks and the way a 4-year-old talks and the way a 5-year-old talks. Teachers begin to recognize how children put words together into making sentences, and they begin to recognize the kinds of errors that children will make when they overgeneralize a rule. For instance, saying, I builded a big building. Yes, you built a great building, so that the teacher is then modeling back how, without correcting the child.
I think because he don't want to go.
He doesn't want to go for the walk, maybe?
When children are reading and they hear themselves read, if they have strong syntax, they'll recognize, oh, that doesn't sound right, and then they'll go back and they'll self-correct or correct themselves. So syntax is really important for them, not just with their oral language, but it sets the stage for a successful reading as well. By modeling proper syntax and producing a language-rich environment, you can help children learn correct syntax with relative ease. The third rule system is phonology. Phonology relates to the sound system or phonemes of a language. Young children listen carefully when adults talk. As they listen, they're learning how to articulate the sounds they hear. This takes a lot of practice. Some sounds are much easier to pronounce, like vowel sounds, because children aren't needing as much muscle development. The flow of air is very fluid. Consonant sounds are much more difficult to articulate, like k or er.
No, I know walking. No, I'm walking, so you have to try to run away from me.
If children have good knowledge of the sounds, good use of phonology, they'll have a much easier time connecting those letters to the sounds and recognizing them when they're encoding or writing words or decoding and reading. So the three rule systems, phonology, semantics, and syntax, are really important for teachers to focus on. But if children develop in each one of those areas in terms of their oral language, they'll be able to use those skills and be more successful as future readers and writers. Some areas of language development that are most predictive of later written language success are expressive language, receptive language, listening comprehension, and unusual vocabulary or rare words. Expressive language has to do with how well children use language to express their wants and needs.
Can I have one more try that?
Receptive language is how well children understand what others say to them in conversation.
All right, who's ready for some water? All right, hold it with 2 hands, please.
Listening comprehension is children's ability to understand and connect to stories that are read to them or songs that are sung together. Unusual vocabulary or rare words are words that are not typically used in daily conversation.
I don't see the parts of your butterfly in your sketch. Where's the abdomen and the thorax?
Some of the most interesting research on vocabulary development in young children has focused on adult use of rare words. The children who had the highest vocabularies were not just the ones whose parents use rare words, but parents who used what the researchers called semantic support. You use common, ordinary explanations that a child can understand.
That's called symmetrical. It means it has the same colors and the same designs on this side as it does on this side.
High-level vocabulary only comes from hearing high-level words, but it's not enough just to use those words. We must also provide explicit support.
You insist, said the hyena, laughing eerily. Eerily is another word for like scared.
One of the best ways you can foster children's oral language development is to provide a language-rich environment in your classroom. A language-rich environment is just where there's a lot of talking. Children are engaged in language use and language play with each other. Teachers are moving around the room and using language, listening to children, encouraging children to talk with each other. They'll ask children to explain things that they bring in, maybe items they brought in for sharing or things that they've created. They'll give children opportunities during group time to talk about or act out something that they've done in class. They'll set up areas of their classroom that have 2 or 3 or 4 or more children so that there's a lot of social interaction. And the teacher should be there to scaffold their language development and bring their abilities to the next level. One strategy for fostering a language-rich environment is using child-directed speech. When you use child-directed speech, you listen to what a child says and then respond using language that is slightly above the child's level of speaking in order to expand their language.
Mine lines.
You're making lots of lines because you're moving it a lot of times.
When you respond to children using child-directed speech, you model more advanced vocabulary and appropriate syntax. Another way to provide a language-rich environment is to engage in self-talk. In self-talk, you describe what you're doing as you're doing it.
I'm going to find my name tag. It's Ashley. I'm going to put on my apron. Make sure I'm ready.
Another strategy that is helpful for language learning is called parallel talk. With parallel talk, you narrate the child's actions.
Oh, I see you put the feet under the legs. You put the hat on top of the head.
Self-talk and parallel talk provide you with an opportunity to connect actions to words children may not yet know. In language-rich environments, teachers are careful to utilize these strategies and engage children in conversations throughout the day.
One of the challenges in a preschool classroom is really knowing the key things that we know matter for literacy later on, and utilizing opportunities that occur spontaneously or things children do in the context of our planned activities, joining with children in a conversation, getting more out of the opportunities that are presented to us.
All right. Perfect. All right. So I am thinking that this video was excellent. What do you think? I think it gave us so many different strategies and just a lot to think about. The little things you can do in the classroom to promote that oral language, right? This video was my favorite. I wonder which one was yours. All right, so that concludes today's class. So you have an online assignment waiting for you on Canvas that is due next week. So 1 week from now, you're going to have that assignment be due. So if you go to Canvas under class number 2, you will see that there is a drop box for online assignment number 1. So when you click on that link is where you're going to drop your assignment, okay? That is where you're going to turn it in, right? Basically, that's where you're gonna turn it in. And then where it says online assignment number 1, it's a document right here. This is what you're gonna actually download. You're gonna click on that, you're gonna download it into your computer, and you're gonna type your answers in there, okay? So you're gonna, so I'm gonna go back to this. First thing you're gonna do, you're going to Canvas. You're going to find the online assignment document. It has this little clip. You're going to download it. You're going to do the assignment, whatever is asking you to do, right? You're gonna save it to your computer. Then you're gonna go back to Canvas and you're gonna find the drop box to drop or to turn in your assignment. And you're going to drop it in the box and it's due next week, all right? And you're good to go, and then you're gonna receive a grade, all right? And then the next thing I want you to be thinking about is your article presentations, okay? So groups A and B that signed up for groups A and B, you need to start working on those 2 groups are gonna be presenting first on May 9th on Zoom. So you need to read the articles provided for group A and B, and then read those, learn the content, and decide how you're going to put a PowerPoint together. Okay, notice that I have created right here on class 2 a video on how to use Google Drive. The Google Drive is a way for you to together work on a PowerPoint from the comfort of your home. You can work on a PowerPoint as a team without leaving your home. You both can work on putting a slideshow together to present to the class, okay? All right, so I am going to let you go and I'll see you soon. I'll talk to you soon. Be ready for next week's work. And if you have any comments or questions, please just email. All right? Talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.